See? Well, yeah, but the Ten Commandments, but basically it's a list of do's and don'ts, right? Well, yeah, but maybe not exactly. Well, the last law is about coveting. Coveting is an inclination of the heart. It's not an action so much as it's a desire, it's an inclination of the heart. Well, that's not a do or a don't in the same way that the laws of our state operate. You know, our government, you're not going to be pulled over by a police officer for desiring to harm some, or desiring to speed on the highway. No, you get pulled over for doing it. You see, so already the Ten Commandments are a little different than we normally think about as law. It's a little different. Actually, it's really different. It's really different. The longest chapter in the whole Bible is Psalm 119. Psalm 119. And I'll tell you that growing up, Psalm 119, if I had a Bible reading plan, and I still do, I have kind of a morning prayer routine, and if Psalm 119 comes up as the scripture I'm supposed to read, a lot of times I'll skip it and go to another psalm. Now, recently I've stopped doing that, but you know why I used to do that? Because Psalm 119 almost felt like a record that was skipping, right? It just repeats because it basically over and over says, God, I love your law. God, I love your law. God, I praise you for your law. God, your law is amazing. God, I praise your law. God, your law is amazing. I meditate on your law, God. I meditate. That's basically Psalm 119 repeats many of these themes over and over. It's a praise to God of his law. Now here's the thing. If God's law was simply a list of do's and don'ts, how do you meditate upon that? Do you meditate upon the laws of North Carolina? Probably not. You try not to break them, but you don't meditate on them. So what's different about God's law? What's so different that we can actually meditate on them? And by meditating, we can actually encounter God. How is that? Well, a number of summers ago, I'm going to tell you a story that I think you might have a good laugh. I was working at a church. Thank you. I was working at a church during seminary, and usually when you work at a church, what do? You do church stuff, right? So you preach, you teach, you visit the sick, right? You teach kids, you do all those good things. But this was a different church. It's not your normal church. I get there, and they say, well, we have a really strong need for you. I was the intern. I wasn't the main pastor. They said, we need you to help out in the special ministry we have. Okay, what's the special ministry? Well, we have a farm. We have a farm that feeds people who are food insecure, who don't have much food, like Julian Food Pantry feeds people, right? So it's a farm that grows food that goes to people who need food. So I said, okay, well, first of all, I don't know anything. But so how can I help? They say, well, just bring your boots, bring your, overalls, what's that? I don't, whatever. And just help out. So I get there, they say, okay, well, what do you know about gardening or farming? No. Have you met me? and they said, oh, okay, well, we don't have time to teach you anyway. All right, just carry like 50 boxes over here, and then come back. And then, all right, 50 boxes over here. And so I was a manual labor guy. But it was important work, and I was happy to do it, and I was with some great people as we were doing it, and it was all going to feed people who needed food as a ministry at the church. Well, one day, they said, come out on the farmland. We got another job for you. I said, okay. They said, one job's going to take the whole day. It's going to be 6-7 hours. You ready? I said, okay. Tomato steaks. But as you all know, these are the 10-foot ones, right? These aren't, because in my mind, I went, oh yeah, Grandma's garden, the little, and no, they're saying the 10-foot metal poles. So they said, all right, you're going to put in 450 of those today. I said, okay, awesome. And they said, have you done this before? No. And they said, okay, well, we're going to give you, what is it called? The big, what do you call it, Rick? What do you call it?
Push driver. And push driver.
Yeah. So we're going to give you that. You're going to jam it down. They said, but for beginners like you, you might want to wear a helmet. Because we've had people get concussions because they'll do this and just jam it and hit themselves in the head. So they said, okay, well, you're gonna do this. And look, we have like 10 or so rows, but each row goes over 100 yards long. So you're going to do like almost 500 stakes. All right? All right, see you later, go. And so I'm doing these stakes. And, growing up, I didn't do any gardening. Now that I'm married to Rachel, I watch some and I try to help, but I really just mess it up. And it turns out, did you know this? You need to stake tomatoes. If you don't, you're in trouble. And so I'm staking these tomatoes, and then after that, and you're going to laugh at me because I don't know what you call it, but then I'm going to call it lining. We got the twine, right? And then you line it, and you do like 3 layers of that. So it's almost, you all know how it goes. And because if you don't, obviously, the limbs of the tomatoes are going to fall, they're going to touch the ground, and once they touch the ground, what's going to happen? The fruit's going to spoil, it's going to be infested, infected, and nibbled, right? Do you want fruit that is spoiled, infested, infected, and nibbled? Probably not, right? And so you're going to stake, and you're going to line it, and it's going to be structured, and it's going to be formed, and it's going to be neatly organized, and then you're going to have really good fruit, right? Thankfully, I did not get a concussion. I didn't hit my head, but as it was like 103 degrees, I probably got close a couple times. But I was structuring this garden, or the farm, but it was a small farm, so whatever you want to call it. Tomatoes was the main thing that they grew. And I didn't mess up too bad, I guess. So it was okay. Well, now that I'm living here, and right when Rachel and I started dating, I'm learning to garden a little, really just watching her. And basically, because of my errors, I've seen what happens if you don't do that, right? And if you don't trellis your cucumbers, it's going to get what? Spoiled, infected, infested, nibbled. And you don't want that. You don't want that at all. I'm sure all of us have had that experience. This tomato, that limb went out and just kind of did its own thing, and I didn't prune it at the time, and so that fruit's gone. It's gone. You see, the 10 Commandments are like these stakes. The 10 Commandments are not simply a list of do's and don'ts, although it has do's and don'ts, which are important. But the 10 Commandments are like the structure of the world itself. It's the structure of the way things are in the world that God made. We just heard that in the puppet show, like gravity. It's a law. And if you defy gravity, you're going to have to suffer the consequences. Like, there was a puppet. Did you hear that? There's a puppet, suffer the consequences of gravity, right? And so, just like these stakes, the 10 Commandments structure this garden. Do you know that the word paradise, I just learned this recently, the word paradise, you know what it means literally? It means walled garden. That's what it means. Paradise means walled garden. And so in the Garden of Eden and in the New Jerusalem to come, you have a walled garden. And the wall's important because it's structure. When God made the world, Genesis 1, what's He doing? He's creating out of nothing, and He's also structuring and ordering chaos. When God creates, He's ordering, He's creating, and He's ordering out of chaos. He's putting things in right order. The 10 Commandments are God putting things in right order. Now, notice this. Why are there 10 Commandments? Why aren't there 12? You hear in the puppet show, maybe there's 12. No, there's 10. Why 10? Why 10? Well, in the Bible, the literal word for when the Bible refers to the 10 Commandments, it doesn't use the word commandments. In your study Bible, it'll give a note. The Hebrew word is word. There's 10 words. That's literally what it says. They're not called 10 Commandments in the Bible. They're called the 10 words. But it's not literal words like, fish. That's one word. No, it's not like that. It just means a word. Like I'm gonna have a word with you, Tanya. It's a saying, right? So there's 10 sayings. There's 10 sayings. What if I were to tell you that if you look in Genesis 1, God created the earth in 6 days, right, and then rested. But what if I were to tell you that Genesis 1, there are 10, there's 10 words that God gives. Let there be light, right? Let there be a firmament. Let there be dry land, and let there be the fruit-bearing grasses and the fruit-bearing trees. Let there be the stars in the sky. Let there be the fish of the air, the fish of the sea and the birds of the air. Let there be birds of the air. If you number it all out, there's 10. There's 10. God created the world in 10 words. And then what happens, the 10 Commandments, now we're so used to seeing the 10 Commandments as like a plaque on the wall, which isn't a bad thing. But we forget about the context of when they were given. When were they given? Exactly when Israel was taken out of Egypt. So what does that mean the 10 Commandments are? They're a declaration of independence. Independence from who? From Pharaoh. Now, for our country, the Declaration of Independence, it doesn't simply say, we're free from England. Awesome. We can do anything. Well, if you can do anything, that's chaos. But the Declaration of Independence says we're free from England, but we're also free within these principles, these laws, these articles that we are committed to for, all of the things that we're committed to, right? It's the same thing with the 10 Commandments. They're a declaration of independence from Pharaoh, but they're also a set of guides, rules for a new nation. So, here's the point. God created the world in 10 days, 10 words, 6 days, 10 words. God creates a people in 10 words. God created the earth in 10 words. God created a people, formed them in 10 words. Stephen, how is a people formed in words? That doesn't make sense. Yeah, it does. If you've been married, you made vows. You were formed as a unit when those words were spoken. You see? And so the 10 Commandments, they are like these stakes in, with tomato plants, right? If the stake isn't there, if it's not lined, the plant's going to fall any which way. The fruit is going to be spoiled, infested, and nibbled. And it's not going to be rightly ordered. If our families are not structured, are not disciplined by the 10 Commandments, well, they're going to fall apart. The most obvious one would be adultery, but do not steal, right? Do not covet, right? I mean, if you do that within one household, it's not going to stay together very long. It's not going to do well. Well, what about a church? Well, what about a nation? Well, what about even each of us as an individual? How are we going to do if we are not structured in the way that God structured the world? If we are not pinned together and bound to the stake that God has planted from the foundation of the world, which are these 10 Commandments, like the tomato stakes, then what do we think is going to happen to us if we're like a tomato plant? We're just going to flop any which way. And the fruit that we wish to bear will spoil, will be infested, and will be nibbled. And so the 10 Commandments are, let's think about it these 3 ways. The 10 Commandments are household rules. The 10 Commandments are household rules. Now, the way you do rules in your house is different than the way that the law is administered for the state, right? So, when you're growing up, if your parents said, clean your room, I know none of you have done this, but sometimes you'll clean half of your room, and you'll say, I did it. There's no problem, I did it. And then your parents will all, of course, sometime they're going to come and say, well, no, you didn't. You're just paying lip service and saying you did. Right? The point of the law isn't just to follow the letter, it's to follow the spirit of the law. It's in order to be closer to God. Right? It's in order to become like God through Christ. So these are household rules, and why are they household rules too? Because they're rules for the whole household of God. These rules, remember, we grew up with these rules, the 10 Commandments in the King James. In the King James, it says what? Thou shalt not kill. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Thou shalt not steal. But notice it's thou. It's not ye. The King James will say ye, right? We say y'all. It doesn't say y'all don't murder. It doesn't say y'all don't commit adultery. It doesn't say y'all don't steal. But is God speaking to one person or a lot of people? Well, the answer is kind of both. Why? Because the whole people of God are the bride of God. And this gets to the next one. The whole people of God are united as one people. So these are also marriage vows. God is making a marriage vow to his people. Notice, I'm not going to go into it, but in the Ten Commandments, did you notice that God says, I'm a jealous God? Right? I'm a jealous God. Right? In a marriage, if one spouse thinks the other spouse is interested in someone else, they're going to get jealous. Right? Why would God say he's a jealous God if he's not betrothed to be married to us? These are marriage vows. The whole Bible is that God has committed himself to be married to us, and the whole Bible, the whole story of salvation, all of history is us getting ready for that wedding. We're getting ready for that wedding. Are you getting ready for that wedding? Are you getting ready so that once you die and come into his presence, that you'll be at the wedding supper of the Lamb? Are you getting ready for the wedding? These are wedding vows. These are wedding vows. So these are household rules, they're marriage vows, and lastly, they are a classroom code. A classroom code, right? When you were in school, you had a code of honor, something like that, rules for school. These are a kind of classroom code. Why? Because these laws are not simply to keep you as a child, but to grow you up in the faith. Right? Charlie and I talked about these in confirmation. And we talked about how it's not simply, did you not kill someone? Have you never murdered? Oh, good. Okay, awesome. Have you never stolen? Okay, you're fine. No. What does Jesus say? If you hate someone in your heart, you're committing murder in your heart. You see, these laws aren't just something we're told in third grade and then, okay, I got it. Perfect. No. Jesus is going to challenge us and say, well, how's your heart? How's your heart? Because, see, it goes even deeper. It goes even deeper. And so this is a classroom code so that we might grow up into the full stature of Christ. And what Roger was sharing earlier about our conference is to remind us as Methodists that we as Christians are not simply to just get saved one day and that's it. Now that's great. I want that for every single person. That's awesome. But John Wesley said, getting saved is the front door of faith. You've just walked into the house. It's a mansion. Do you know how many rooms there are? And when you walk into this room, you experience the joy of God. When you walk into this room, you grow into the joy of, I always say joy, the faithfulness of God. You walk into this room, you grow into the gentleness of God. Walk into this room, you grow into the self-control of God. The fruit of the Spirit, that we're supposed to be growing more and more and more. It's not just that we're forgiven of our sins. That's awesome and it's essential and important. But we also are free from the power of sin now. It's not simply that, are you forgiven? That's essential and it's important. But are you free from the power of God in your life? Or free from the power of sin in your life now? When I was staking those tomatoes, and I didn't know what I was doing. They just told me what to do. That summer had some of the worst storms we had ever had. Some of the worst storms, and there was a hailstorm that was so intense, we had to leave the fields, go into a garage. We left the garage door an inch open, and you should have seen the ice coming through that 1-inch slit at the bottom of the garage door. There was like this much ice that flew through that thing. It was like an ice machine. If you just, it was crazy. But when we went back out, you know, the lettuce was destroyed, right? The kale was destroyed. The strawberries were destroyed, all this stuff. But then we go over the tomatoes. And 95%, I mean, for the most part, they were totally fine. Why? Because they were staked. They were structured. They were ordered like a walled garden, like paradise itself. They're structured. They have stakes. Nothing's going to move them. No storm is going to destroy them. Nothing's going to take their fruit. Right? And it's the same with us to the extent that we're anchored in Christ, that we're anchored in His Word, that we're anchored in His law, that nothing can move us, that our fruit won't be spoiled. Remember just a couple weeks ago the parable of the vineyard, and the owner of the vineyard, he sent his servants, and the tenants killed one, beat another, and stoned another, and then he finally sent his son and killed his son. And there's only one thing the tenant wanted, and he was so patient. Could you imagine being the boss of 6 employees and they're all killed by somebody, then you send your son, they kill him too, and he didn't even have the police or militia go after him. He just said, I just want one thing. I just want fruit. I just want the fruit. That's all I want, is the fruit. God is calling us to bear fruit, to go into that house, the household, the fullness of Christ. And what are those fruits? It's love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And so, as we meditate on God's law, as we meditate on these 10 commandments, may we come to see that God has made marriage vows to us. And as we have been baptized and confirmed in the faith and follow Him, we've made vows to Him too. We've been given household rules, not because it's punitive, not just to follow the letter of the law, but to have a relationship with God. We can't follow these on our own, but He gives us the strength to by His Spirit. And He's given us a classroom code so that we might not stay in kindergarten our whole life. Could you imagine that? That'd be some trouble. That'd be some trouble. You wouldn't want to wear diapers your whole life. Same with our faith. It's time to grow up. It's time to grow deeper. It's time to be rooted and staked in His law. And so as we in this season go forward as a church, as we discern how to equip each other to know more of God, as we have these small groups, Sunday school, as we discern how to do mission and outreach and evangelism, may we be staked and bound in His Word and by His Spirit. Thanks be to God.